The crystalline halls of the Orionis Scholarium shimmered under the soft blue glow of floating diplomas. Alien students from a dozen species moved through the corridors, their bioluminescent skins casting shifting patterns across the polished floors. Some had tentacles that curled around data crystals, others floated on anti-grav fields, their many eyes scanning information streams. Dr. Elena Vasquez walked with measured steps, her human silhouette stark against the kaleidoscope of alien forms. The heels of her boots clicked against the glass-like floor, a sound drowned out by the chittering of Vorak scholars and the harmonic hum of Phyraxian speech. She adjusted the collar of her lab coat, standard issue for all researchers, though hers lacked the chromatic patterns that denoted rank among the Federation's scientists. Dean Vex'lir waited at the end of the hall, his superior frame towering over the other faculty. His forearms were folded in what Elena had learned was a sign of disapproval, his chitinous plates shifting from deep blue to an uneasy violet. Behind him, a cluster of professors watched, their expressions unreadable to human eyes but unmistakable in their smug satisfaction. Dr. Vasquez, Vex'lir intoned, his voice a modulated vibration that made the air hum. You have been summoned. Elena kept her face neutral. She had expected this. The whispers had started weeks ago. Murmurs in the research halls, sidelong glances during symposiums. The Federation Science Council had been convening in secret, and human researchers across the Scholarium had been disappearing from their posts one by one. She followed the dean into his office, a domed chamber where holographic equations flickered in the air like ghosts. The door sealed behind her with a hiss. The council has reached a decision, Vex'lir said without preamble. He extended one clawed hand, offering her a crystalline data slab. The termination notice glowed ominously in the dim light. Elena took it, her fingers tightening just slightly. The text scrolled before her eyes. Official Federation script, cold and bureaucratic. By unanimous decree of the Science Council, all human-led research initiatives within Scholarium jurisdiction are hereby suspended. Human methodologies have been deemed unstable and incompatible with Federation standards. Effective immediately, Dr. Elena Vasquez is relieved of her position in the quantum physics department. She exhaled slowly. 10 years. 10 years of work, of fighting for every scrap of recognition, of enduring the condescension of scholars who called her equations quaint and her experiments reckless. And now, with a single decree, it was over. Is there an appeal process? She asked. Her voice steady. Vex's mandibles twitched, as a Pyrrhian smirk. There is no appeal. The council's decision is final. One of the other professors, a Phyraxian whose crystalline form refracted the light into prismatic shards, stepped forward. You must understand, Dr. Vasquez, human science is unpredictable. Your reliance on empirical testing, on these, he waved a dismissive hand, equations. It lacks the elegance of thought pattern modeling. The Federation cannot risk its advancements on such primitive methods. Elena's jaw tightened. Primitive. The word burned. Newton, Einstein, Hawking, reduced to a punchline in this gleaming tower of arrogance. She looked down at the notice again, then crumpled it in her fist. The crystalline material resisted, but she crushed it until it cracked, the glow fading like a dying star. Vex'lir's plates darkened. That was an official document. And now it is garbage, Elena said, dropping the shards at his feet. Just like your verdict. The room went still. The other professors exchanged glances, some amused, some affronted. None of them had expected defiance. Humans were supposed to bow, to accept their place at the bottom of the academic hierarchy. You will leave the premises by sunset, Vex'lir said coldly. Your research logs will be confiscated and reviewed for any irregularities. Irregularities code for anything we can use to discredit you further. Elena turned without another word and strode toward the door. As it slid open, she heard the muffled laughter of the faculty behind her. The sound followed her down the hall, mingling with the whispers of students who had already heard the news. Human science banned. Too unstable, too dangerous. She clenched her fists. They had no idea what danger really looked like. Hidden in her pocket, her personal datapad hummed softly. On its screen, buried beneath layers of encryption, a single file pulsed with promise. Project Icarus, operational. The Federation had just made its biggest mistake. They'd given her nothing left to lose. The grand lecture hall of the Orionis Scholarium hummed with the low-frequency chatter of 100 alien voices. Crystal arches refracted light into shifting patterns across the tiered seating, where students from 24 species lounged in their adaptive perches. Elena Vasquez took her usual seat in the back, the only human in a sea of shimmering exoskeletons and floating sensory orbs. Professor Kreltok, a Vorak with segmented limbs that clicked when he moved, activated the central hologram. A crude animation of an apple falling on a human's head appeared, exaggerated for comedic effect. The hall erupted in a chorus of chitters, clicks, and harmonic laughter. "Observe," Kreltok said, mandibles twitching in amusement. "The so-called genius of human science. They needed fruit to understand gravity." More laughter. A Phyraxian student near Elena flicked his bioluminescent frills in her direction. "Tell me, soft skin, did your ancestors also require falling rocks to comprehend basic kinetics?" Elena kept her expression neutral, fingers tracing the edge of her datapad. She had heard it all before, the mockery, the condescension. 10 years in the Scholarium, and they still treated human contributions like children's scribbles. Kreltok expanded the hologram, displaying a complex Vorak thought pattern matrix. While humans were still throwing sticks, we had already mastered gravitational manipulation through pure cognition. No equations, no crude instruments. A Cerealian student pulsed its floating orbs in agreement. Their reliance on mathematics is adorable, like watching a fledgling attempt flight with broken wings. Elena exhaled slowly. She had spent the last 6 months running simulations in secret, cross-referencing Federation dogma with human theoretical models. Every test confirmed the same thing. Their so-called thought pattern science was built on flawed assumptions. But speaking up meant exile, or worse. The hologram shifted to Newton's equations, deliberately distorted to appear nonsensical. Kreltok's antennae twitched with amusement. "And this is what they call fundamental law." A Zephyrian student near the front raised a clawed hand. "Professor, is it true human universities still teach this? Primitive methodology?" Kreltok's exoskeleton rippled in a Vorak shrug. "Unfortunately, their stubborn adherence to outdated concepts is why the Federation Council revoked their research privileges, a necessary precaution." Elena's grip tightened on her datapad. The screen flickered with suppressed data, her own work proving that Federation thought pattern physics was mathematically identical to human tensor calculus, just repackaged. A Phyraxian leaned over, his frills glowing with condescension. "Don't take it personally, soft skin. Your species simply isn't equipped for true scientific advancement. I've never seen a Phyraxian derive a unified field theory without borrowing from Einstein." The hall went silent. Kreltok's limbs stiffened. "That is a dangerous accusation, Dr. Vasquez." "Is it?" She tapped her datapad, and a stream of equations projected into the air, side by side with Federation-approved cognitive models. The match was undeniable. The Cerealian's orbs contracted in shock. This is fabricated." Elena smirked. "Run the proofs yourself." "Oh wait, you can't because your thought pattern science doesn't allow for peer review." Kreltok's exoskeleton darkened with anger. "Enough. The Federation Council has ruled on this matter. Human science is unstable, dangerous. To suggest otherwise is treason." The hologram flickered off. The students murmured, some uneasy, others glaring at Elena with newfound hostility. She stood datapad in hand. "You're right about one thing, Professor. Human science is dangerous." Her smile was ice to lies. As she walked out, the hall erupted behind her. Not in laughter this time, but in panicked debate. Her datapad glowed with the final piece of the puzzle, Project Icarus, ready for activation. Let them mock equations. She was about to rewrite the galaxy's understanding of physics. The laughter of the lecture hall still burned in Elena's ears as she slipped through the maintenance corridors beneath the Orionis Scholarium. The university's underbelly was a maze of flickering lights and exposed conduits, forgotten by the gleaming halls above. Her boots echoed against the metal grates, the sound swallowed by the hum of distant machinery. She reached a sealed door marked hazardous materials, restricted access. A quick swipe of her stolen access chip, and the door hissed open. The air inside was thick with the scent of ozone and something sharper, the tang of overclocked electronics. Her lab, not the one the Federation had given her, the tiny monitored closet where they'd expected her to fail. This was hers, built piece by piece, circuit by circuit, from scavenged Federation tech and smuggled human components. The walls were lined with jury, rigged consoles, their displays flickering with equations the Scholarium had dismissed as primitive. At the center of the room stood her masterpiece, Project Icarus. The machine was an ugly thing by Federation standards, all sharp angles and exposed wiring, a far cry from their sleek, organic-looking tech. But Elena knew better. Shed built it to work, not to impress. She crossed the room, her fingers brushing the activation panel. The machine responded with a low, resonant hum, like a beast waking from slumber. "You're sure about this?" Elena turned cale. The only alien in the Scholarium who'd ever treated her as an equal stood in the doorway. His 4 eyes glowed faintly in the dim light, his carapace shifting with unease. "They revoked my credentials," Elena said, her voice steady. "They called our science unstable." She tapped the console, and the holographic display flared to life, a swirling vortex of equations, human and alien, intertwining. But they never understood what we were really doing. Kale's mandibles twitched. "If you're caught, I'm already fired," she smirked. "Might as well go out with a bang." She entered the final sequence. The machine's hum deepened, the air around it warping as the containment field engaged. A sphere of distorted space formed at its core, light bending around it in impossible ways. Kale took a step back. That's not supposed to happen. According to Federation physics, no. Elena's grin was sharp, but according to mine. The sphere pulsed, the room trembled, and then proof. The holographic display erupted with data, streams of numbers confirming what Elena had known all along. The Federation's vaunted quantum mastery was a house of cards. Their equations were incomplete, purposely so. The missing pieces, human physics. "I've been lying," Kale whispered. "Worse." Elena's eyes locked onto the readout. "I've been stealing." A klaxon blared overhead. Red lights flooded the room. Security breach detected. A mechanical voice intoned. "Unauthorized energy signature in Sector Phi B." Kale's carapace clattered in alarm. "I've found you." Elena didn't hesitate. She yanked her drive from the console, stuffing it into her pocket as the machine powered down. Time to go. The door burst open. 2 Vorak enforcers filled the frame, their exoskeletons gleaming under the emergency lights. Their leader, a hulking brute with serrated mandibles, leveled a stun rifle at her chest. "Human," he snarled, "you are in violation of Federation Scientific Decree Fea." Elena raised an eyebrow. "Which one's that? The one where you steal our work and call it yours?" The Vorak's grip tightened on his weapon. "You will be detained for." She hit the emergency override. The room's power died. then reignited in a surge of feedback, the consoles overloading in a cascade of sparks. The enforcers staggered, their optics blinded by the sudden flare. Elena was already moving, ducking past them into the corridor. Kale followed, his multiple limbs a blur. "You've just made enemies of the entire Federation Science Council," he panted as they ran. Elena laughed, wild and free. Good. The alarm klaxons shattered the university's usual hum of scholarly discourse. Red emergency lights painted the crystalline corridors in bloody hues as Elena sprinted down the hallway, her boots slipping on the polished floor. Behind her, the rhythmic clicking of Vorak Enforcer's exoskeletons echoed like a death knell. "Subject Vasquez, halt!" The synthesized voice boomed from the lead Enforcer's vocal modulator. "You are in violation of Scholarium Code Phi Alpha." Elena didn't look back. She rounded a corner and nearly collided with a group of startled Firaxian students, their translucent skin pulsing with panic. "Move," she shouted, shoving past them just as a stun beam crackled overhead, scorching the wall where her head had been. "You think you can hide your primitive experiments?" Another enforcer, this one with the distinctive blue carapace of a Zephyrian security officer, materialized from a side passage, his forearms spread wide, blocking her path. "Human science is a danger to the galaxy." Elena's breath came in ragged gasps, the weight of the data chip in her pocket, her life's work, the proof that would bring the Federation's scientific empire crashing down, felt like it was burning through her lab coat. She feinted left, then ducked right as the Zephyrian lunged. His claws scraped the wall as she slipped past, her shoulder slamming into his midsection hard enough to send him stumbling ahead. The corridor branched. Left led to the faculty wing, certain capture. Right went to the student docking bays. Elena chose right. "All units, target is heading toward Bay Fay." The lead Vorak's voice crackled over the comms. "Seal the sector." The hallway lights flickered as emergency protocols engaged. Glass doors began sliding shut with ominous finality. Elena poured on speed, her lungs screaming. 20 meters. 10. She dove forward just as the final door hissed closed and rolled through with centimeters to spare. The thunderous clang of metal meeting metal vibrated through the floor. She allowed herself one shuddering breath before pushing upright. The docking bay stretched before her, rows of personal shuttles gleaming under the harsh work lights. Somewhere in orbit, the USN Defiance waited. If she could just... "Going somewhere, Doctor." Elena froze. Chancellor Vex'lir stood between her and the nearest shuttle, his tentacles coiled tight with anger. Behind him, 6 more Scholarium guards fanned out, weapons raised. "You've betrayed the Federation's trust," Vex'lir hissed. "Your reckless experiments could have destabilized the entire quantum lattice of this sector." Elena wiped sweat from her brow. "My experiments proved your precious Federation science is built on lies. You've been suppressing human research for centuries." The Chancellor's bioluminescent stripes darkened. "Take her," he ordered, "and wipe that chip." The guards advanced. Elena's hand crept toward the emergency release on her belt, a human-designed failsafe the Scholarium's scanners had dismissed as primitive. Then the universe exploded. A concussion wave knocked everyone off their feet as Bayfay's outer doors blew inward. Shrapnel pinged off shuttle hulls as a sleek, matte black craft roared through the gap, its engines screaming in defiance of Federation docking protocols. The USN Defiance's boarding ramp dropped before the ship even touched down. "Need a ride?" Captain Ryan Blake's voice carried over the chaos as armored human marines poured down the ramp, pulse rifles trained on the stunned aliens. Elena didn't hesitate. She sprinted past the Chancellor, who was still struggling to right himself, and leapt onto the ramp just as the Marines laid down covering fire. "Go, go, go!" Blake shouted. The ramp retracted as the Defiance's engines flared, lifting off with Elena clinging to a safety rail. Below, Vex'lir's outraged shriek was lost in the roar of thrusters. As the ship cleared the docking bay, Elena finally let herself collapse against the bulkhead. Blake offered a hand to pull her up, his grin visible even through his helmet's visor. "Told you we'd be listening," he said. Elena patted the data chip in her pocket. The Federation had no idea what was coming. The docking bay doors hissed shut behind Elena just as the first stun. Beams scorched the metal. She sprinted across the polished floor, her boots slipping on the smooth surface. The stolen access chip burned in her palm. One wrong move, and she'd be spaced before she could blink. "Human, stop immediately." The Vorak enforcer's voice boomed through the bay, his armored legs clicking against the deck. Elena didn't look back. She vaulted over a cargo crate, her lungs burning. The Defiance had to be here. Captain Blake had promised extraction. A plasma bolt seared past her shoulder, melting a hole in the wall. She ducked behind a fuel line, fingers flying over her wrist terminal. The encrypted channel crackled to life. "Defiance, this is Vasquez. I'm in the bay. They're right behind me." A shadow loomed over her. The Zeperian guard from earlier, his forearms raised, stun rods crackling. "Your primitive tricks end here," Elena smirked. "Yeah, about that." The bay doors exploded inward. A sleek black hull filled the opening, the USN Defiance's forward guns humming with barely contained energy. The Vorak enforcers skidded to a halt, their exoskeletons twitching in alarm. Elena Vasquez, Captain Ryan Blake's voice echoed through the bay speakers, calm and deadly. "You're late." She sprinted for the lowering ramp, had to make an exit. The Defiance's point, defense turret swiveled. A single shot lanced out, vaporizing the Zeperian's stun rods. The enforcers scrambled back as the human ship's engines flared, lifting off without clearance. Inside the bridge, Elena collapsed into the co-pilot's chair, her hands shaking. Blake didn't look up from the controls, his jaw set. "Did you get it?" She pulled the data crystal from her pocket. Every last byte, their entire quantum framework built on stolen human research. The comms officer, Lieutenant Cho, whistled. "They're gonna lose their damn minds." Blake punched the throttle. The Defiance streaked away from the Scholarium, leaving the panicked university behind. "Patch me into the Federation wide. Band time to return the favor." Elena slotted the crystal into the console. The holographic display flickered to life, decades of suppressed equations, experimental logs, even the original human researcher's name scrubbed from Federation records. "This is Captain Ryan Blake of the United Earth Starship Defiance." His voice carried across every open channel in the sector. "You've been lied to." The data streamed out in an unstoppable wave on 1,000 worlds. Alien scientists gasped as their life's work unraveled. The Federation breakthroughs were human discoveries. The revolutionary thought patterns were stolen equations. The Science Council's response was immediate. "This is treason." Chancellor Vex'lir's voice screeched over the comms. "That data is classified." Elena leaned into the mic. "Not anymore." The Defiance's screens lit up with incoming messages. First, a trickle, then a flood. Alien research vessels, independent colonies, even Federation loyalists, all demanding answers. A Faraxian scientist's face appeared on screen, his crystalline form flickering with distress. "These equations, they match our core theorems exactly, but the timestamps are 50 years older than your discoveries." Elena finished. Blake crossed his arms. "Council's scrambling. Half their fleet just went dark, ships refusing orders." Cho grinned. "Looks like the galaxy's got trust issues." Elena watched the chaos unfold on the monitors. Entire research stations were rebelling. The Scholarium's once proud towers now swarmed with protesters. A new transmission cut through, this one from a Vorak battleship. The captain's exoskeleton was dull with shock. "We were never the pioneers, were we?" Blake met Elena's eyes. She nodded. "Humanity's been playing catch up," the captain said. "But the race was rigged from the start." The Vorak captain bowed his head. "Then the debt is ours." The Defiance soared toward the jump point, leaving the crumbling Federation in its wake behind them. The first human-aligned systems were already declaring independence. Elena exhaled, watching the stars streak past. They rejected our science. Blake chuckled. Turns out science doesn't care about politics. The last thing the Scholarium heard was the Defiance's engines roaring into FTL, and Elena's final words echoing across the galaxy. You rejected our science, but science rejected you. The crystalline halls of the Orionis Scholarium trembled with the weight of truth. Screens across the campus flickered with Elena's broadcast, her calm voice dissecting centuries of Federation lies. Alien students froze in the corridors, their bioluminescent skins flashing in distress patterns as the realization struck. A Phyraxian junior dropped his thought, crystal, the delicate lattice shattering against the floor. This can't be right, he whispered, his voice cracking. Our quantum theorems, they're just repackaged human equations. Nearby, a Vorak enforcer's armored exoskeleton plates clattered as he staggered back from his patrol partner. You saw the data, his partner hissed, mandibles trembling. The council knew they buried human research to keep us dominant. Chaos erupted. A Zephyrian doctoral candidate tore her holographic diploma from the air, the light fracturing in her claws. 10 years, she shrieked. 10 years memorizing lies. Her cry ignited the mob. Students from a dozen species surged toward the Chancellor's spire, their appendages slamming against the once pristine walls. Inside the council chamber, Chancellor Vex'lir's crystalline form flickered under stress fractures. Seal the doors, he barked at the remaining enforcers. Suppress the transmission. A Vorak guard hesitated, his weapon lowering. With respect, Chancellor, the human's proof is irrefutable. Our entire quantum curriculum matches her stolen notes. Vex'lir's core pulsed crimson, the Zephyrian equivalent of panic. You'd take a human's word over centuries of Federation science. The guard's exoskeleton plates flexed in a shrug. I take the data's word. He stepped aside as the mob's roar shook the doors. Elena didn't smile. They built their pride on stolen work. Now they'll burn it down themselves. Below the Scholarium central spire, once a gleaming monument to Federation intellectual supremacy, belched smoke as protesters overloaded its power grid. A team of Vorak enforcers, now siding with the students, ripped the council's insignia from their armor and joined the storming of the archives. In the shattered remains of the quantum lab, a lone Phyraxian postdoc named Crixel sifted through the wreckage of Federation-approved experiments. His thought tendrils trembled as he accessed Elena's published files on his datapad. By the void, he murmured. His entire dissertation on subspace harmonics was there, in human notation, dated 30 years before his birth. As a Pyrian elder limped into the lab, his crystalline body dull with shame. You see it now, don't you? Crixel's tendrils coiled tight. We've been teaching their discoveries as our own, erasing their names, calling them primitive. He hurled his datapad against the wall. How many human scientists died unknown while we mocked them? The Elder's core dimmed. Too many. By nightfall, the Scholarium's gates lay in ruins. Alien students camped in the courtyards, trading Federation textbooks for bonfires. A Vorak valedictorian, her exoskeleton still gleaming with graduation honors, stood on the rubble of the Chancellor's podium and addressed the crowd. The Federation told us humans were backward, she declared, her voice amplified by a scavenged comm unit. But we were the ones clinging to dogma. Their science was here all along, buried because it threatened the Council's power. Murmurs spread through the crowd. A Cerellian floated forward, its orb like eyes reflecting the flames. What do we do now? The valedictorian's mandibles clicked in resolve. We go to Earth, we learn from the source. As the mob cheered, the last of the Scholarium's holographic diplomas flickered out overhead, their once prestigious seals now meaningless. Aboard the Defiance, Ryan handed Elena a steaming mug of coffee, real Earth coffee smuggled past Federation trade bans. "They're calling it the Great Academic Revolt," he said, grinning. "Half the galaxy's universities are shutting down. The other half are begging Sol Academy for curriculum advice." Elena sipped the bitter brew, watching the Scholarium's lights die on the view screen. They wanted to suppress human science to keep us inferior. Ryan clinked his mug against hers. Turns out truth's harder to bury than they thought. Below them, the first ships of alien scholars burned toward Earth, their holds empty of Federation degrees, their databanks hungry for real knowledge. The era of stolen science was over. The crystalline spires of the Orionis Scholarium lay in ruins, not from weapons fire, but from the weight of shattered reputations. Alien students who had once mocked human science now crowded the transmission hubs, desperate for any scrap of information from Earth. The Federation Science Council's lies had unraveled faster than quantum entanglement, leaving the galaxy's brightest minds adrift in a sea of doubt. Elena Vasquez stood on the observation deck of the USN Defiance, watching the chaos unfold through the viewport. Captain Ryan Blake handed her a steaming mug of coffee, real Earth coffee, not the synthetic swill the Federation served. "Looks like you started a revolution, Doctor," he said, nodding toward the swirling mass of ships now converging on Sol. "Science doesn't lie," Elena replied, her voice steady. "Even when bureaucracies do." Down on Earth, the Sol Academy's gates had been thrown open wide. Alien scholars, Zephyrians, Vorak, even a handful of Phyraxians, flooded the halls, their once prideful postures now hunched in humility. They carried Federation diplomas like worthless trinkets, begging human professors to validate their knowledge. In the grand lecture hall, where Newton's laws had once been ridiculed, a hush fell as Elena took the stage. The holographic display behind her showed the equations she'd risked everything to prove. Human equations. The foundation the Federation had stolen and suppressed. A Vorak elder, his exoskeleton dull with shame, stepped forward. "We were misled," he admitted, his voice trembling. "Our entire understanding of quantum mechanics was built on your work. The Council erased your species' contributions to maintain control." Murmurs spread through the crowd. A young Zephyrian researcher raised a trembling appendage. Will you teach us?" Elena smiled, not with triumph, but with the quiet satisfaction of truth finally acknowledged. She tapped her datapad, and the screen shifted to a single line of text. Admission requirements, curiosity, humility, the courage to unlearn. For the first time in centuries, the galaxy's scientists sat in silence, not to mock, but to listen. Human professors moved through the rows, handing out fresh datapads loaded with uncensored research. The air hummed with the energy of discovery, not dogma. Outside, the news feeds blared with reports of Federation chancellors resigning in disgrace. The Orionis Scholarium's once gleaming towers stood empty, its halls echoing with the ghosts of lies. Meanwhile, Earth's universities overflowed with alien scholars desperate to start over. As the sun set over the Sol Academy, Elena stood at the center of a crowd of beings from a dozen species. They pressed closer, not to jeer, but to ask questions. Real questions, for the first time in their lives. "You rejected our science," Elena said, a voice carrying across the silent hall. She let the words hang in the air, watching as the weight of them settled over the gathered aliens. Their bioluminescent patterns flickered with uncertainty, their pride stripped away by the unassailable truth of numbers and evidence. Then, with a smile that held no malice, only the quiet fire of vindication, she finished, "But science rejected you." The room erupted. Not in laughter, not in scorn, but in something the galaxy hadn't heard in generations. the sound of minds breaking free. Datapads lit up as alien scholars copied human equations with reverence. Federation degrees burned in waste disposals across the quadrant. And in the ruins of their old arrogance, a new era began. One built on the only thing that ever truly mattered: the truth.